the beginning. The year was 1955, and the world was on the brink of a technological revolution, though few could see it coming. In the quiet suburbs of Seattle, Washington, a boy was born who would one day redefine the way humans and machines interacted. His name was William Henry Gates III, but history would remember him as Bill Gates. From an early age, Bill was different. While other children played outside, he buried himself in books, encyclopedias, history volumes, complex mathematical theories, anything that promised knowledge. His mother, Mary Gates, a strong-willed businesswoman and civic leader, encouraged discipline and ambition. His father, William Gates Sr., a towering figure in the legal world, instilled in him a sharp analytical mind. In their household, dinner conversations weren't just small talk, they were debates, challenges that sharpened Bill's intellect like a blade. Yet, for all his intelligence, Bill struggled to fit into the traditional mold of a student. He despised rigid structures and rote memorization, finding schoolwork uninspiring. But everything changed when he was 13 years old. Lakeside School, an elite private institution, had acquired something remarkable, a teletype computer, one of the few available at the time. Most students regarded it as an oddity, but for Bill, it was an obsession. The moment he placed his fingers on the keys, something clicked. Lines of code became his new language, logic his playground. Then, fate intervened. In the corridors of Lakeside, Bill met a senior student named Paul Allen, a quiet but equally passionate tech enthusiast. Where Bill was brash, impulsive, and outspoken, Paul was methodical, patient, and deeply analytical. But they shared one thing: a hunger to understand computers, to push them beyond their limits. Together, they hacked into the school's computer system, not out of malice, but out of sheer curiosity. They wanted to know how it worked, how far they could push the boundaries. When caught, instead of being expelled, they were offered a unique deal: improve the system's efficiency in exchange for unlimited access. From that moment, they were inseparable. They spent hours, days, weeks in front of the glowing screen, writing programs, breaking them, rewriting them. The world outside became irrelevant. Here, they had power. But power often comes with a price. Bill, always the strategist, saw something others didn't: the future. He dreamed of a world where every home had a computer, where software wasn't just a tool but an extension of human potential. Paul, ever the realist, admired his ambition but warned him, "We're playing with fire, Bill." And perhaps they were. What they didn't know was that this passion, this unrelenting pursuit of innovation, would set them on a collision course with destiny, and with giants far more powerful than they could ever imagine. The revolution had begun. This keeps the section engaging, character-driven, and conflict-oriented while setting up the larger story. Want any refinements before moving to Section 2? The rise of Microsoft. The dorm room was dark except for the eerie glow of a computer screen. Bill Gates sat hunched over his desk, fingers flying across the keyboard, his mind working faster than his body could keep up. Harvard University had always been a dream for many, but for Bill, it felt more like a distraction. He wasn't meant to follow the path laid out for him. He was meant to build his own. Across the country, his childhood friend Paul Allen had stumbled upon something extraordinary: a cover story in Popular Electronics about a new microcomputer, the Altair 8800. It was rudimentary, almost laughable by future standards, but Bill and Paul saw it for what it was: a revolution in waiting. They worked relentlessly, writing a version of BASIC, a programming language that could run on the Altair. When they called MITS, the company behind the Altair, they lied, claiming they already had a working version. In reality, they had nothing. But when the company showed interest, they worked day and night to create the program from scratch. When Paul flew to Albuquerque to present it, the stakes couldn't have been higher. If the program failed, it would all be over before it began. But as the Altair's screen flickered to life, displaying the very code they had written, the impossible happened. It worked. MITS hired them immediately. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. But for Bill, it came with a cost. Harvard was no longer an option. At 19 years old, he made the most important decision of his life. He dropped out. "Are you sure about this?" his father asked, concern evident in his voice. Bill didn't hesitate. Absolutely. In 1975, Microsoft was born, a name that fused microcomputer and software into one. They had no office, barely any money, and yet they had something more valuable than capital: vision. But success wasn't immediate. Bill was demanding, obsessive. He scrutinized every line of code, berated mistakes, and pushed his small team to exhaustion. Good enough wasn't in his vocabulary. Perfection was the only standard. Then, in 1980, fate knocked again. IBM, the most powerful tech company in the world, was searching for an operating system for their new personal computer. They approached Microsoft, believing Bill could deliver. Once again, he bluffed. He didn't have an operating system, but he knew where to get one. Microsoft acquired a small, unremarkable system called QDOS, refined it, and rebranded it as MS-DOS. When IBM signed the deal, they made a crucial mistake. They let Microsoft keep the rights to the software. Bill had just outmaneuvered a giant. By the time Windows 1.0 launched in 1985, Microsoft was no longer a scrappy startup. It was becoming an empire. But success breeds enemies. And in the shadows, rivalries were forming, ones that would soon test Bill Gates in ways he never expected. The battle for the future had begun. The billionaire and the backlash. By the early 1990s, Microsoft wasn't just a company, it was a juggernaut, and at its helm stood Bill Gates, now the richest man in the world. His software powered nearly every personal computer on the planet, and Windows had become a household name. But power is a double-edged sword, and with dominance came scrutiny. Behind closed doors, the industry whispered a single question: was Microsoft too powerful? To Bill, the answer was simple. There was no such thing as too powerful. He had spent his life outthinking, outworking, and outmaneuvering his competition, and he wasn't about to stop now. He had already bested IBM, proving that giants could fall. But another rival lurked in the shadows: Apple. Steve Jobs had always been different, charismatic, artistic, a master of showmanship. If Gates was the cold, calculating strategist, Jobs was the visionary with fire in his eyes. Their relationship was a tangled web of admiration and betrayal. In the early days, they had worked together. Microsoft even built software for Apple's Macintosh. But as Microsoft grew, so did the tension. Then, in 1995, Bill made his boldest move yet: Windows 95. It was sleek, user-friendly, and most importantly, strikingly similar to Apple's Macintosh interface. Jobs was furious. He accused Gates of stealing his ideas, of lacking originality. Gates, ever the tactician, remained unfazed. "Steve, it's like we both had this rich neighbor named Xerox, and I broke in to steal the TV first," he quipped. But while Apple fumed, another storm was brewing. By the late 1990s, Microsoft's monopoly had become impossible to ignore. The U.S. government launched an antitrust lawsuit, accusing Microsoft of using its dominance to crush competition. Prosecutors argued that Gates had forced computer manufacturers to bundle Windows with every PC, leaving competitors like Netscape and Linux gasping for air. For the first time, the man who had always been in control found himself on the defensive. During his court deposition, Gates was defiant, evasive, often answering with deliberate vagueness. But his usual confidence had a different effect under legal scrutiny. The media seized on his cold, calculating demeanor, painting him as the villain of Silicon Valley. The trial dragged on, and in 2000, the verdict was clear: Microsoft was guilty of antitrust violations. The court ordered the company to be split in two. It was a stunning blow, a moment where it seemed Gates' empire might finally collapse. But he wasn't done fighting. Through appeals, negotiations, and strategic concessions, Microsoft avoided the breakup. The company paid hefty fines, but Gates held onto his empire. Still, something had changed. The man who once thrived on competition and control began to see the world differently. The fire that had driven him to dominate the tech industry now burned in a new direction, one that had nothing to do with software. And for the first time in his life, Bill Gates considered a future beyond Microsoft. A new purpose. For decades, Bill Gates had been synonymous with Microsoft, a relentless strategist who played to win. But by the early 2000s, the world was changing, and so was he. The antitrust battle had left its mark, and while Microsoft remained powerful, Bill began to question what winning truly meant. In 2000, he stepped down as CEO, handing the reins to Steve Ballmer, his longtime friend and business partner. It was a calculated move. Ballmer could focus on Microsoft's future, while Bill turned his attention elsewhere. For the first time, his mind was occupied by something bigger than software. That same year, he and his wife, Melinda Gates, established the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, a philanthropic empire with a singular mission: to tackle the world's most pressing problems. If technology had been his first battlefield, global health, poverty, and education became his next. And just like before, he played to win. One of his first targets was polio, a disease that had paralyzed millions of children worldwide. Where governments hesitated, Gates acted. He poured billions of dollars into vaccine research, infrastructure, and distribution. By 2020, polio had been nearly eradicated, a feat once thought impossible. Then came malaria, HIV, sanitation, and education. No longer the ruthless businessman, Gates reinvented himself as the problem solver for humanity. He collaborated with world leaders, funded cutting-edge research, and pushed for policies that would reshape global health. But transformation doesn't come without resistance. Critics accused him of wielding too much influence over global health policies, of playing the role of an unelected world leader. Conspiracy theories swirled, painting him as a master manipulator, someone who hadn't left power, just changed its form. Through it all, he remained unshaken. He wasn't looking for approval, he was looking for results. Then, in 2020, the world faced its greatest challenge in a century, the COVID-19 pandemic. Gates had long warned that a global health crisis was inevitable, but few had listened. As the virus spread, his foundation rushed to fund vaccine development, manufacturing, and distribution. He became a polarizing figure, celebrated by some as a visionary, vilified by others as a shadowy force behind the crisis. By 2021, Bill and Melinda's personal life also took a turn. After 27 years of marriage, they announced their divorce, shocking the world. Still, both remained committed to their foundation, proving that their mission was bigger than their personal struggles. And yet, the question lingered: